Hello everyone, I'm Ryan and this is my discussion slash thoughts slash review slash whatever on Fire Emblem Engage. I have been playing this game for about the past week and I just finished it about an hour ago. I like it a lot. I think, I'll give my general thoughts and then I'll kind of go into some more detail. I think it's one of the stronger single Fire Emblem titles. I don't know if it's my favorite. I don't think there ever will be a game that is my favorite outside of Radiant Dawn. I think Radiant Dawn is going to be my favorite until the end of time, just because of how that game affected me. But that game also has a lot of Path of Radiance history, as being like the second in a duology, so it kind of has an unfair advantage. But for singular Fire Emblem games, I think it's one of the strongest, and it really kind of blew my mind. Because going into it, I knew the gameplay was going to get me hooked, I knew the music was going to be really good, and I liked the character designs, but obviously I didn't know their stories. But the story looked very vanilla, looked very kind of GBA Fire Emblem, very like you know exactly what's going to happen, you're just strapping in for the ride, which was fine. Like I was fine with that, because it was kind of nostalgic in a sense. As long as it wasn't like Fate's bad, I was happy. But obviously, I do tend to prefer more deep stories and like more lore and world building, kind of like what Three Houses brought in some routes and Three Hopes. So I was fine with that being like a little bit of a downstep. But honestly, I mean, I'll get into it more, but honestly, it surprised me and I really enjoy what I played. Now I'm going to go into I'll have sections for gameplay, music, and then characters and story will be kind of the last one, because that's one I have the most to talk about on. Gameplay, it is Fire Emblem, and it's refined, and it has its own gimmick with the Emblem rings, which are equipable rings that contain spirits of previous Fire Emblem characters, and they will give buffs in various stats just by equipping them. But then they also have a separate buff of engageability, which allows them to do more things, being very general, more things that typically tie to the character that they're engaged to. For example, a ring that you get early on is one for Sigurd, the Lord from Genealogy in the Holy War, Fire Emblem 4, and that ring allows your unit to move farther, because Sigurd has a horse, he rides on a horse, so his movement stat is higher than a normal walking character's. And then you also have the engage ability to do what they call an override, where you slam into the opponent in front of you and you like move to the space opposite of it, doing an attack, and you can attack multiple enemies if they're in a row. So they all have a lot of really good uses. I'll talk about some of my favorite ones. Sigurd is really good. I love having high move on characters. It lets you clear a lot of maps early. I'll get back to that specific point in a minute. But his override ability was really good for clearing out multiple enemies in a row. I loved having this ring, and I had one character that went on it. I'll go through my team also in a minute. But there was no way that this ring wasn't on my team whenever I had it available. Another really good one is Ike, and I knew right away I was going to have Ike on the main character as soon as possible, because Ike is my favorite Fire Emblem character. He is from my favorite Fire Emblem game, and he is really good. When reading his description, I was a little worried he wasn't going to be as good as he is, because he's based on kind of counter-attacking, which is typically a playstyle I don't tend to like, because I don't like to take damage if I can avoid it. But his engageability makes it so you can throw whichever unit has him out in like an open field with a bunch of enemies, and then you defend for a turn, and then you'll take all the damage that you take from the enemies, and then you just dish it back out to every enemy in a 2-range radius. And it's insane watching just dozens, well not dozens, probably like I think 10 is the max, 10 enemies falling to one counterattack, and I had it on Alir, the main character, because at that point that I got him, my Alir was very bulky, so he was able to live anytime he did this. One thing I do want to mention for the engage abilities is you can only use the engage abilities on once every time that they've been engaged, and when you start out, you can only engage for 3 turns, so it's typically best to either start the map with it or finish the map with it. So once you use your engage ability once, you can't use it until you re-engage, which is possible by fighting in combat. You can restore your ability to re-engage during a map, or you can wait on a tile, a specific tile that is it glows blue and has like an aura around it. That'll automatically refill your engage meter for the next turn. So you can use these abilities more than once in a map, but you kind of need to be smart of when you do use it. Another really good one is Lyn, who has an ability to target enemies that are far off with her, I think it's like an Astra bow of the sorts. It plays off of the classic Fire Emblem skill of Astra of hitting 5 times with kind of weaker damage, but I had that on the character Rosado, who is a Wyvern Knight, so with a lot of high movement. It basically let me pick off 1 unit on any given map and just eliminate them completely, and sometimes even bosses, at least partially, because bosses in this game will have more than 1 health bar, and it's kind of like how 3 Hopes had multiple health bars for their larger enemies, like some of the final bosses, where you can't just finish them with one unit specifically. You need to have kind of multiple rounds taking them down. So having Lyn be able to take that out, you could sometimes easily take out an entire health bar with just that one ability. And then the final one that I want to mention is Byleth. Byleth, of course the main character from 3 Houses, has an amazing engage ability to dance, which in Fire Emblem terms is you get to have another unit move again. You can sacrifice your turn to give someone else a second turn. With Byleth, you can do that for all units within a cross radius, like so the unit directly above, below, to the left, and to the right of you. It's kind of like the Herons from Radiant Dawn, where you can just give up to 4 units another turn, which is ridiculous, and really helped with ending maps earlier than I really should have by playing strategically, which is awesome. I love being able to exploit the game's mechanics to optimize like my play, to have the ability to do more as an option. You don't have to use like Byleth's ability like that, but the fact that you can is really cool. And some of the lower in like the rings that I didn't use as much or didn't think were as useful, and I could be wrong, I'm not like a person who studies the meta, but Lucina, I'm kind of sad to say, was kind of eh. I mean, where you get her in the story, it's fine, because any ring is better than no ring, and if you like absolutely do not have a ring for somebody, it's fine. But of the available rings, I think Lucina was kind of lower tier. I felt Corn was going to be a lot better, but I just didn't end up using her at all. I paired her with Saline, the Prince of the Kingdom of Farinay, and she was the stat buff. That was about it. I didn't use her engage ability at all, just because I was so built on mobility, whereas Corn is really good for like a defensive playstyle. And another one that I didn't use too much, I would say, is Erica and Ephraim. I like that they have 2 in 1, so you can like swap which buff you want. But all in all, it just wasn't too great. But I love seeing the representation anyway. Oh, another really good one is the DLC. So you have Wave 1 of the DLC is currently out, which gives you the ring for Edelgard, Dimitri, and Claude. Edelgard is kind of the main one, and then Dimitri and Claude are in parentheses there, because they rotate on a shift. And that part about him kind of stinks, because you can't really predict which one you'll be on in a given turn, but eh. But Kiki is insane, because when you engage, you transform into a dragon, and I like that the colors are dependent on what unit engages them. But Tiki is insane, her moveset is insane, and she also gives a buff of basically giving everybody who is engaged to her or has their skills I can't think of the name of it right now, but the skill that Donald from Awakening has that raises their growths, the same thing is here, and then another character has that same skill, but this skill is something you can trade and give to other people, which is also really good. So step 1 in the game is definitely to raise your SP, which is your currency that you can use to buy skills from other rings that you don't have equipped, so you can still get those benefits. Basically, you want to get that skill onto your units, so all their growths are raised, and then you also want to get the lineage skill from the Edelgard ring, which gives you a 20% buff to experience gained. And I just remembered the skill from Tiki's is the Star Sphere, because it mimics the Star Sphere from New Mystery of the Emblem. So with that, I definitely think characters are really good when they're given certain rings to help the things that they're good at. I'm not the person who knows exactly which character is best with which ring. I just kind of went with what felt good, and I'm going to go over the team that I used and the rings that they had equipped. I know I covered some a little bit, but I'll go into some depth. So first, I went with the male Alir, and you can name this character whatever you want. They're not going to speak your name in dialogue, in the voice dialogue, but they will have it in text. Their canon name is Alir, and they are a divine dragon, although of note, I'm going to bring this up later in the story thing, they never become a dragon in gameplay, so they are entirely a sword-wielding unit, which is fine, because we did have Corrin, who did the whole dragon thing, and they were worse as a dragon than when they were wielding the sword. So I'm not like too upset about it. Alir is good. I like them a lot. They grow to be really, really good. The first few levels, I would say the first like 5 levels, they're okay. They're pretty good. Nothing too crazy, but going on, they definitely go really, really good. And at the end of the game, they were my strongest unit. That also is for many other factors, you know, the weapons they get and the ring power that they get, etc., etc. So overall, I really like Alir. Gameplay-wise, I'll talk about story-wise, you know, in a bit. Then the next unit that I decided to use was Etie. She is an archer, and she is probably, I don't know, I would say top 5 archers in the series. I don't think she's stronger than Takumi from Birthright, but I think that is like a very high bar to set. I think she's probably the second best archer you've had in the series. I could be forgetting someone, but right out the gate, she doesn't need any assistance. She doesn't need any help with anything. She's just really good, and her strength is insane. Like when I finished, she had like 42 strength, and I know that sounds like crazy high, but one thing I do want to say is this game is like Awakening, where you can second seal. If you don't know what this means, play Awakening. You'll understand after you beat the game. Or just play Engage. But your characters can go from level 1 to level 20, and then they can use a Master Seal to go to an advanced class where they have a final tier of level 1 to level 20. And certain classes go from level 1 to level 40 without that change. Once you get max class at like level 20 at your advanced class, you can use a second seal to return back to level 1 in that advanced class, keeping all the stats that you had before. and the only downfall is that you lose the skill that you get from your advanced class at level 5 until you get it back when you get to level 5. So that's the only downfall, and you can also, and then additionally you can change into whatever class you want based on the weapon proficiencies that your unit has, which you get by leveling up your bond with the emblem rings, which is like a separate level up thing that you have with that character. Like Lear could be level 10, and if you just give him a new ring, like say you get the bond ring for Ike, then you start that at level 1 with that bond level, and then you can raise that to 10, and then you'll be able to do that emblem rings paralogue, where you fight them on a map that is from that game that they came from, and if you win, then you unlock their second half of their bond level. Discuss that in a second. I'm going on a lot of tributaries here. I'm really excited about this game. And Etier, is really good, and she was that strong because all of my units at the end of the game were on their essentially 3rd tier, because they went through their full class once, got to their advanced class, went through that once, and then second sealed back around. So they were really strong. And with her, I put the Edelgard ring on. To begin, I started by giving her the Sigurd ring because an archer with high movement is really good. So I maxed her out to 10, and then I gave her the Edelgard ring. Just because it was good to pair with Claude's Fail Not. Just another good weapon. Overall, really good. The only complaint I would say is just kind of low defense, but you know, that's kind of to be expected with an archer. Everything else was fantastic. Then next up, I have Louis, who is a knight, and again, really good. I don't know if I would necessarily say he's the best armor knight in the series, because Lucas from Shadows of Valentia is really, like, I don't know if I fully consider him an armor knight. I mean, kinda. Gaiden's weird, and like Echo's Shadows of Valentia is weird also, so I guess he counts. If he does count, he is the best armor unit, period, to my knowledge. And if not, then I think Louis takes it, because Louis is insane. He just does everything. He does everything you need him to. I gave him the Sigurd ring, so he had movement capability. This man had like 56 defense by the time that I finished the game. And he has a pretty good resistance growth rate too. Like when I finished, he had like 26 resistance, I think, which is your magical defense. And he maxed out speed at 15, which, I mean, he's an armor unit, so speed isn't gonna be his strong suit. But even then, he still was able to cap it. Louis was insane, and I really liked him, and I just gave him a refined steel lance, and he was always a very dependable unit, and unless he got like cornered by multiple magic units, he was not dying. He was not even taking damage. That's how good he was. And then Chloe, the Pegasus Knight, again, just this game just gives you strong units, and just says, here, make absolute monsters out of these guys. Chloe is amazing. She's one of the best Pegasus Knight units. I don't know if I would necessarily say the best, because there is some stiff competition, especially with like Paula from Shadow Dragon or New Mystery. The Pegasus Sisters in Shadows of Valentia are really good. Valencia can like be considered up there. She was really good, and I will say she was really good in the beginning, and she was really good in the end. In the middle, she kind of was okay, but that also is because I wasn't really outfitting her weapons as much as I was everybody else, so that also could be a part of it. And by not as good, I just mean like not literally the best, like top of their class. Like, she was still really good. I ended up giving her the Byleth emblem ring, so she had the ability to make others dance again, or move again with the dance. And that was really good, especially because she has high movement herself as a flyer. I ended up turning her into a Griffin Knight, so she could have the ability to use staves as well to heal. Now, I realized that she would have been even stronger in combat if I made her a Wyvern Knight, but I wanted the stave staff usability, especially for something that happens in a little bit. I'll talk about that in a second. Then next up was Diamant. He is the Crown Prince of Brodia. I should mention the previous characters that I just mentioned, Etier, Louis, and Chloe. Oh, and Celine. Oh my god, I forgot Celine. So Celine is a mage, but she's kind of like Celica's class, where she has magic and swords. And she had the Celica ring for quite a while. And with the Celica ring, she's really good. Without the Celica ring, she's not as good. And that's related to to part of that gameplay thing that I was going to talk about in a bit, you know, after we get through the rest of the characters that I used. So, Celine was pretty good. She fell off hard, but I kept her along, and then she got good again. Diamant is a Brodia, the next nation. He is a very strong, fast-ish sword wielder. I love his design. He's probably one of my favorite like character designs, and he's very strong. He came with the Roy emblem ring, and I like him, but he has one kind of big flaw, and it's an ability that makes it so both he and enemies have higher chances to hit each other, which means he takes a lot of damage, which is kind of unfortunate because his defense isn't the highest. It's like relatively high, but you know, take 3 hits and you're gonna start needing help. So I liked him. He could definitely dish out damage, and I gave him the Leaf Ring for quite a bit, and then ended with giving him the Roy Ring. But the one thing I would say is maybe reclass him to something that has a bit more defense or mobility, because mobility is also another thing that was a bit of an issue for him, just because he is he's just an infantry unit. Then next up is, I guess these next two I got before Diamant, but they were from no, the first one isn't from Paralog, the first one's from Chapter 6. So, Yunaka. Yunaka is probably one of the best characters in the game. She is a thief, and thieves are one of those classes that just go straight to level 40, and then they rebound back to level 20 of their thief class. They use knives, and knives are one of the best weapons in the game. And Yunaka is just insane. She has insane growth, she has really good bases. Her strength is really good. She can poison enemies with her knives, and she comes with Emblem Micaiah, who is another one of my favorite characters, which gives her the ability to use staves. And she uses her engage ability, Great Sacrifice, which heals literally everybody on the field, maximum range, at the expense of bringing her HP down to 1. So you can literally use Great Sacrifice, kind of mimicking Micaiah's sacrifice from Radiant Dawn, to heal everybody in the field, and you can use one of your other healers to heal Yunaka back up. So that way you have your whole army healed up with 2 heal uses. And Great Sacrifice is amazing. It also is a really good way to level up units that you're not training, or if you are using them and you just want to get a level up quick, just use Great Sacrifice. It's nuts. Obviously use it when you're not in range of other units because you're at 1 HP. Even though with Yunaka it's not a huge problem because she dodges literally everything and her chance to crit is insane. Yunaka, fantastic unit. Really, really, really strong. Kind of like Celine though. You do lose the ability to use Micaiah for a certain point, and so like that part of it does kind of stink, but unlike Celine, Yunaka does not fall off. She is just as good combat-wise. So yeah, Celine, fantastic. Then next up was Anna. So Anna is from a Paralog, and she is not high on a lot of people's tier lists. And I can see why people would think that, But honestly, for me, she was probably one of my stronger units. And she does require a little bit of babying at first. She's an Est, I would say. The Fire Emblem archetype where you kind of need to baby them a little bit to give them experience. But when they start getting going, they're not stopping. And Anna is really, really, really strong. I kept her an Axe unit, so I first made her a Berserker, and then I went and then reclassed her as a Warrior when she reached max. I gave her the Tiki Bond Ring, so I guess going based off of character alone without Bond Ring or Emblem Rings, I guess I could see, but she just worked that Tiki Ring so well, and she did so good with it. And she also has a skill, personal skill, that makes it so you have a luck percent chance to get gold after you defeat a foe, which is really good because gold is essential in this game. And from that, I don't have anything like real complaints about Anna. She has kind of low HP and defense to start with, but then she just gets going. Next up is Rosado, who is a Wyvern Rider, and he is a gender non-conforming icon. He is really good, and he needed a little bit of babying, only for the fact that he joins kind of late. I think it was like chapter 14 or 15, but I was able to get him right on par with everybody else, and he was the one who I had the Lyn emblem ring on, so again, he was just really good at knocking out far away foes. And then finally, I had Marin. I realized that Marin was earlier in my... I'm looking at the Fire Emblem wiki, and based on how the characters were organized, I skipped Marin. Marin is a Wolf Knight. She is a knives unit, or she has knives, and she rides atop a wolf, which is a new class, which is really, really cool. And like I said, daggers and knives are probably like the best weapon type. So having a more mobile version of Yunaka, it's really good. Very uniquely, she was getting a lot of magic growth, more so than I would have needed because I didn't have any staff use or magic use on her. So that might be something to work with. But really good. Avoided a lot, defended against a lot, hit a lot. And that's it for those guys. Now, I was alluding to a point. There's a point in chapter 11 when events happen, we'll talk about that in the story, and you lose every ring that you had attained up to that point, which was Marth, Celica, Sigurd, Leaf, Roy, and Micaiah. Yes, those 6. So all of those units that were using those rings before now do not have that capability. And this leads into a chapter that is really cool, probably the best escape chapter in the entire series, where the enemy is using the rings that they stole from you against you, and also a gameplay mechanic that was stolen from you, the ability to turn back time and like redo turns. It's called the Time Crystal in this one. It's this version of like Millis Turn Wheel or Baleth's Divine Pulse. So the enemy is using this mechanic that you've been using, or you have had the option to use throughout the game, to prevent you from stealing the rings back, because they'll turn back time and give the ring to someone else, and they'll like hop units. It's super cool. It's a really cool gameplay story integration, and it's the best escape chapter in the series, like bar none. Speaking of different kind of battle types, the map design and the kind of gameplay objectives in this game is amazing. It's the best in a very long time. The one like common complaint from Fire Emblem since Awakening is that the map design is not the greatest, and that you end up having just a lot of maps where you just have to route the enemy, and that's all. There's not a lot of strategy compared to older games in the series. And I mean, that was especially prevalent with Shadows of Valentia, with it being like a very faithful remake. Obviously that made sense, but it is what it is. and with 3 houses having a lot of repeated maps based on the 4 stories that you could play, or the 3 stories you could play, and then the DLC. So variety was at kind of a, like, it was something that was very noticeable, and if you played just one map or one route, you know, you didn't notice as much, but if you went to go play through all 3, then you definitely noticed it. So to say that we have a very classically designed Fire Emblem again is very exciting, and there are a lot of objectives, and the maps are very unique, and obviously when you go through the skirmishes, which are like the optional battles you can do if you want to grind or do whatever, you'll be on the same maps that you did, but each story map is unique, and the objectives, especially as you go on, get more unique and strategic, and especially near the end, the last like 5 or 6 chapters, each had like really unique maps, and they were really good and also really, really tricky. And I played this on the normal difficulty because I set out to start every Fire Emblem game with the baseline easy. Maybe not the, like, if there's a set of 4 difficulties and there's like easy, normal, hard, whatever, I'll do normal. And if it's just like normal, hard, maddening, I'll do normal. But I set up for the base level experience, and it was tricky. It was tricky at times. My units became like gods at the end, where singular enemies weren't going to take them down, but you could definitely, like, based on how the maps are set up, or based on how the objectives are, or how the enemies can swarm you at certain points, it really impressed me, and that was what I was hoping for most out of this game pre-launch, because it made me feel nostalgic in a way that I haven't felt in a while for Fire Emblem. And I'm someone who loves classic Fire Emblem. I consider Fire Emblem to have kind of 3 distinct eras. There is the Kaga era Fire Emblem, which is Fire Emblems 1 through 6. I would consider Binding Blade to be like still kind of a Kaga era design. And then the classic, I would say, Fire Emblem is Blazing Blade, or just Fire Emblem here in the States, or FE7, all the way up to New Mystery of the Emblem, like the DS version that we never got. Or if you're just counting those as faithful remakes, then I would say Radiant Dawn. And then new Fire Emblem from Awakening to current day. And I love each era for a lot of different things. Obviously there are a lot of similarities because it's Fire Emblem. I love Fire Emblem. But a lot of people don't like new Fire Emblem, and I think people that don't like new Fire Emblem but like classic Fire Emblem will really like Engage, because it is a lot of what classic Fire Emblem used to bring out in pretty much all cylinders, and it marries those concepts to new Fire Emblem. And one of those things is the Somniel. The Somniel is the new form of the Garrigmach Monastery from 3 Houses, or for the My Castle from Fates. And honestly, I think it's my favorite iteration of this. The things that I do for it, or do in Somniel, are a fraction of a time that it took for me to do things in My Castle or in Garrigmach. And I love Garrigmach, but I will definitely say on repeat playthroughs of 3 Houses, there's a lot that I feel like I need to do in order to get to the next chapter in Garrigmach, and it can be a pace breaker. Somniel is very much a lot quicker to get into, a lot quicker to get where you need to go and where you want to go, and it has a lot of stuff that you can do if you want. And I think I will do more on like a second playthrough, because I wanted to go at a brisk pace, so like I found the things that I typically wanted to do. One quick note, there is an option after you beat a chapter, you can like explore the battlefield in like a hub world-esque nature, and you can, you know, find some items, you can adopt animals to bring back to Somniel. Adopt dogs. Whenever you see a dog, adopt a dog. Because if you go to like the farm, kind of like ranch area in Somniel, the animals you adopt and that you set out to kind of go graze will give you items. Dogs will give you the ingots, like the ore you need to refine your weapons. I didn't really understand this until, like, that they gave specific items until, like, about halfway through the game, and I would have been able to benefit from that from a lot longer, so. Adopt all those doggos. Adopt everything, but, you know, you can let the doggos out to graze. You'll thank me later. Other places that I went to in the arena, like Insomnia, were the arena, where you can do 3 battles to gain experience each time you visit Somniel, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's like a nice little boost to help someone, because you get experience whether you lose or you win. Units don't die if they lose. And then they have the Emblem bond, where you can spend bond fragments, which are kind of like a secondary currency that you get from getting achievements done. You can claim them and get. That's basically, bond fragments are the equivalent of Fire Emblem Heroes' orbs, and I mean this in the way that they unlock everything to do with emblems and the in-game gacha system, which sounds scary, but it's more like a Xenoblade 2 gacha system, where there's 0 money transfer, you don't purchase anything whatsoever. It's solely through either finding bond fragments in the world or by getting achievements. And with those, you can either level up your bond with an emblem without having to like have them equipped to that character, which is good for getting skills on characters, which is very helpful because it's very cheap to do so as well. Or you can go into the ring room, I can't remember the exact name of it. You can go there and you can use the bond fragments to get bond rings, which I may have called emblem rings bond rings by mistake earlier in the video. Oops. Bond rings are kind of like minor rings that are based off of other characters from the games that the emblem rings are coming from. Each character has, I believe, 10 possible bond rings that are all represented by characters from their game. So, like, Marth will have 10 characters from either New Mystery of the Emblem, FE3, or Shadow Dragon, FE1. And Salka will be Shadows of Valencia and Gaiden. Sigurd is FE4, Genealogy of Holyware, etc., etc. And you pull these through it like a gacha system, and each character has a C, B, A, and S variant. And obviously the higher ranking variants are the stronger ones. These bond rings are essentially, if you don't have enough emblem rings like early in the game, you can give these bond rings to someone and they'll give them the stat boosts that that ring has, that obviously aren't as great as an emblem ring, and they don't have the ability to engage with the bond rings. So it's a cool thing that eventually you will outgrow, you won't need anymore, but if you want to like collect the rarest rings for your favorite characters that are available, that's cool. I think that bonding with the emblem rings, using like the bond fragments for those, is more important than going for the gacha. But I will say I did pull on the Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn banners with Ike and Micaiah because I am a whore for Tellius. Anyway, I think that's about all I have to say on the gameplay side of it. I really enjoyed it. It was definitely the perfect difficulty. I'm going to be trying hard mode next, which I know cuts your experience by a crazy amount, so my units won't be so overpowered. So that'll definitely be interesting. Next up, I'm going to move on to the music, which is going to be a comparatively shorter section because there is less specifically to talk about. I want to say this game starts off with a 4Kids anime opening, and it's really, really good.
Rise from 1,000 years ago, shaking off a hazy dream. Meet the cloud who cares for everyone, the rising force of black and steel, fighting in the desert sand. Meet the snow that sweeps across the fields, the light and dark we saw our sky.
Anyway, yeah, I just had to get that out of the way. Second of all, the battle music in this game is really good, and I love the main leitmotif that is kind of used throughout the game. It's an earworm, and it comes back around in the finale, which is a thing that I love when it happens in games. And I know it's a cliche, but it's a good cliche. It works, and it's really good, and it's still in my head even now. The final thing that I want to mention, the paralog maps for each Emblem character they use remixes of various like battle music from those games, and oh my god, each of them is fantastic. Like, I would say close to the best versions of these songs, period. But I have to give special commendation to Ike's theme, which is basically just Ike's and Micaiah's themes are basically two Radiant Dawn medleys, which is amazing because Ike is in his like Radiant Dawn design, so he's basically just another Radiant Dawn representation, like rep, which is fantastic. The only thing like Path of Radiance about him are his bond units being Path of Radiance art, and his paralog map is a Path of Radiance chapter. Everything else about him is Radiant Dawn. But his medley is The Devoted, which is my favorite Radiant Dawn song. And I love seeing it come back. And it's mixed with Eternal Bond, which is Ike's theme from Radiant Dawn, and then a bit of the Victory fanfare from Path of Radiance. So there's like a little bit of Path of Radiance in it. But this theme is so good, let me play it now. And Micaiah's is so good because it's from the Dawn Brigade section of the game. And I love hearing these songs remixed again because it's been so long. I'm so hungry as a Radiant Dawn fan. I'm eating, I'm nomming all of this fan service up. And I just love it. Both of them are fantastic. And I have to go quickly in the music section since it's generally a sound. I do want to mention all of the Emblem characters have their voice actors from Heroes, and that means Ike is voiced again by Greg Chun, who at this point is just Kaname Date from I, the Somnium Files. I love it. Like, he's not even trying to like hide it anymore, and it's fine. I'm not complaining about this in the slightest because I love this man's voice. It's so good. And likewise, Micaiah is using her more recent voice actress, Veronica Taylor, who you may know as Ash from Pokemon. And she's just Ash from Pokemon. Okay, enough gushing. I'll be here all day. Yeah, I think that's about it for the sound. It's all really good. Everybody did a really good job. I don't hear any awkward voice acting, any stilted performances. Everything works. Alright, so now we're going to talk about the story, and this is going to cover spoilers for the entire game, so if you care about story spoilers, this is your time to duck. I've talked about everything else about this game that I really am excited for, with the exception of the Datamine DLC, which I will bring up in this portion of the game. So, spoilers from here on out. I will specifically bring up a spoiler window about the DLC so that you can have a separate spoiler window in case you know the story but you don't want to know the DLC. Okay, moving forward. So, I mentioned that this game's story at the beginning seemed very predictable, and it was very predictable. Everything up to, I would say, about Chapter 10 was very by the books Fire Emblem. And it very put to mind the idea that this is an anniversary game. This was originally supposed to be the 30th anniversary Fire Emblem title, you know, releasing alongside the Shadow Dragon English version and Three Hopes, and technically it just barely missed the 30th year because it's January 2023, but so that's why we have like all of the emblems as like the other main characters. Like it's a celebration of the whole series, and why I believe also it is returned to form. And I think that there are a lot of intentional nods to other games in the series, like with the prologue being a flashback to, well, the prologue being a premonition of sorts, which my theory was there's a flashback because the whole deal is Alear fought in a war 1,000 years ago, went to sleep, woke back up. The prologue being a premonition is very much an Awakening callback, because that game opens up in the same exact way, and the bond between Marth and Alear is very similar to Chrom and Robin. So it's a very like direct allusion to Awakening. And then pretty much exactly after, you have an allusion to Fates. Now I know you're trembling, I was too, but when Alear wakes up and he's greeted by Lumera, his mother, the practically same exact scene plays out as when Corrin meets Mikoto in Hoshido from Fates, as what happens with Alear and Lumera. And I'm pretty sure the choreography of like them hugging is like 1-to-1. So it's a very distinct like 3DS Fire Emblem callback era with Awakening and Fates, which I took notice of and I appreciated, because that part of Fates is, I would say, part of the good part. It's not where it's bad yet, so referencing good parts of Fates is fine. I want to make that clear. But as a whole, I will say, this game feels like if Fire Emblem Fates was done right, and I'll get to that in a second, but I want to like make a very bold statement. I feel like this game did what Fates was trying to do, which is weird because this is one single game with one timeline, and I feel like both this and Three Houses did what Fates tried to do, but better. Three Houses with the multiple story routes, and Fates with the align with the story of what you were raised with, what you were born with. And going through, I took very special, like I knew Marth was going to be the first emblem you got, because Marth is the poster boy of the series. He's like the mascot character. He's the one everybody knows. He's the one from Smash Bros. Like perfectly fine. I fully agree. What's interesting is the second emblem that you're introduced to is the one that Lumera carries in like her tutorial battle against you. It's Sigurd from FU4, Genealogy of the Holy War. This is very interesting, and throughout the story, Sigurd is basically like touted as the second in command, sort of like the just under Marth in iconicness, which is very interesting because the fans, I would say that is very true for like a very core part of the fan base. But for the general public, because Sigurd's game never came out to the West, I don't believe that's true. I think like Byleth and Lucina especially, would be considered like the second tier of character, and even Corrin, as much as Corrin's whatever. So I think putting Sigurd here is very intentional, and there have been rumors about a Genealogy remake happening. There have been rumors that it was originally happening on the 3DS, and then that project got cancelled when the 3DS was coming to the end of its lifespan, perhaps as like another Echoes title. Be that as it may, I do believe that Genealogy remake is coming, and Sigurd is like right here, front and foremost, to get people's eyes on him, so that they can learn more if they do not know, or if they do know, they can be in on it, in a sense. I think Sigurd being second is very intentional, and I do think they took the fan consideration for the emblems in like how fans felt about them, because they wait a bit to give you Ike, who is like a fan favorite, and Ike is regarded as like the strongest out of all the emblems. Like he is touted as being like the most powerful of them. I think they know that we like Ike. Anyway, we'll get to Ike in a minute. So, Fire Emblem things happen. We meet the Prince and Princess of Firene, the closest nation to Lethos, which is the land that Lumera kind of rules over and Alir wakes up in. And Alfred is very visually similar to Dimitri, but is like the exact opposite in every way possible. I like him and Celine. I wish I used Alfred so I could know more about him and like through his supports. Celine is kind of milquetoast. Like she's about flowers and how flowers are pretty, and she's kind of okay as a character. But Alfred was interesting. He had an interesting dynamic. And that's when we meet, like, you know, Etier and Alfred's other retainer, Boucheron. And shockers, if you didn't guess that the parent in Fire Emblem was gonna die, the parent in Fire Emblem died. Lumera is killed by a hooded figure who is a person of mystery. And she dies in Alir's arms. It's very much like Fate's. It's very kind of similar motion-wise to any other Fire Emblem parent death, but it's not emotional at all because we've known her for like one chapter, and then she dies pretty much immediately after. So admittedly, this was a very like, okay, come on, yep, let's go through the motions. Parent dies, check, let's move forward. And then immediately after, you meet this character in a field named Vale, who is very interestingly got like the two-tone hair design that Alir has, just black and white. And it's easy, second one, to call like, this is the fucking girl who, this is who was under the hood. This is who killed your mom, and it's going to be like a late game twist, and we're going to befriend her the whole time. And I was getting a lot of Anthony from Fire Emblem Fates Revelation vibes, which kind of turned me away, because I'll get to that in my Fire Emblem Fates Explained series eventually. But so yeah, she's a mystical character. She doesn't join your army, but you're gonna see her every so often. And you kind of continue through. You meet the Queen of Firene. You move forward. You meet the new people of Brodia. Alcris is a character of note. He is the younger prince He's an archer. I chose to not use him because I have ETA, so I don't know exactly how he is gameplay-wise yet, but he starts off, he's really cool. He gives very, very obvious Takumi vibes. And I was like, oh, it's just dark-haired Takumi. And then he learns that you guys are traveling with a divine dragon, and he does this like super sky-high anime like leap, and then he goes into this huge like begging for forgiveness, and you learn that he is like super butterball, and that really made me like him a lot. That like dramatic heel turn, like he'll fire at you without warning, and he'll have the cool, deep, edgy anime boy voice. And then when you get to know him, he's just like a sack of potatoes that will like fall over at the slightest gust of breeze. He's really good. I liked his character a lot. And then you go on to meet Diamant, who is kind of the more actually tough. He is a very Ryoma-esque character, and the design is very similar to it, and gameplay-wise he's very similar to it, and I'm fine with it because Ryoma was one of the very big highlights from Fates. I liked him a lot. He's really cool. I like his design. Like I said, he's one of my favorite designs. And you meet King Morian, who is their dad. He's the King of Brodia, and he is basically a giant teddy bear. Like, don't like any of my enemies, I'm like a monster, but to my friends, I'm a very big, huggly teddy bear. He's very cute. And you learn that Brodia and the third country, Illusia, have been kind of at war for a bit, whereas all the other countries are peaceful with each other. The King of Illusia basically challenges challenges Morian to a 1v1, except with 1v1 it's their armies. And you know this is where Brody's gonna die, or Morian's gonna die, because it's a Fire Emblem parent. Very interestingly, the Firene Queen doesn't die. She and the Last Kingdom Solm's Queen also does not die. Those are the only two parents in Fire Emblem that live. So you cross over into Illusia, and then you've come across some of these like rapscallions. There's a few of them, like there's Ivy and Hortensia, who are Illusian princesses. But then there are some other like sneaky characters who are evil. One being Zephia, she's like a mage dragon, who also, again, does not ever become a dragon at any point during the story. Very interesting choice. But you see these kind of like groups of villains that are on like grouped together, but not necessarily always working together, which is an aspect of games that I like, is when you have kind of multiple factions of villains who, at the beginning, they're all working for the same villain, who is the evil Lord Sombron. But as you go through the game, you'll see kind of like splinter cells faction away from this centerpiece. And you see the four hounds, who are very reminiscent to the Wolf Academy from Three Houses. They're very similar, where they were kind of all outcasts and they found family together. Early on, that's all they seemed to me, and they were fine. There's Zephia, there's Marnie, there's Mauvir, and there is Gris. And they all have kind of like specific traits that they follow at the beginning. Like Marnie is like the bratty one, Mauvir is like the Camus, the knight who, if he wasn't on this side of the war, he would be your best friend. Zephia is like the leader, she's in control, she's the tough woman act. She's very Camilla-esque. And then Gris is a masochist, and he loves being in pain, which is interesting. And as you go through Illusia, you come to the Illusian capital, and this is where you come into that Chapter 11 sequence where it's revealed that the girl that you've been like kind of seeing every now and then, Vale, is a bad guy. What? But it's interesting they revealed that it's not she was bad the whole time, but she has like a split personality. and the Four Hounds, Zephia mainly, have been like drawing out that personality. So when the kinder veil that Alir met, that wasn't like a ruse, that was like legitimately a person meeting somebody and befriending them. And she has no memory of when the split personality takes over. And then vice versa, the split personality has no memory of meeting Alir and such. And it's through here that they steal the time crystal, which was given to us back by Saline way back when we met Firene. I forgot to mention that. So she steals the time crystal and she steals the emblem rings, and then re-engages them against us. So all the Fire Emblem characters have red hair now, and the ones that have red hair just have red clothes and such, which is a cool like distinction because enemy units in Fire Emblem are always red, player units are always blue. So having like the red versus blue conflict there was really cool to see. And then that brings us back to that escape map, which I mentioned, which is really, really cool gameplay story integration. And it ends with Princess Ivy of Elusia betraying her father, not betraying her father, betraying Lord Sombron because of the death of her father. And she steals Lucina's bond ring and Lynn's bond ring from the enemy and gives them to you. And that's where I said Lucina is like kind of okay, I guess, because Alir no longer has Marth, so Lucina is better than nothing. But overall, I think Lucina is probably one of the lower good ones. And so the group has to regroup, and they travel through Solm, and they meet Folgado and Timera, the royalty of that nation, where they start to like kind of recollect bond ring or emblem rings, such as Ike, who's traveling with Timera, and Corrin. And then you go forward, and you go through like this next part of the story is like recollecting the other half of the bond rings that you didn't have before, and then going into recollecting the ones you did get. Going through that, there's story there and it's good. It's just like this is a part where you're doing a lot of gameplay stuff, and I was doing a lot of grinding, so the story was like kind of further in between. You see the conflict between the Four Hounds kind of start to widen as Mauvir you see that he like cares about the actual Lady Vale, and the further you go on, she is kind of being like used more and more for these evil purposes. You continue fighting until Mauvir and Marnie break away from the Four Hounds to like assist you as you travel back to Lethos. Well, first you go to Elusia, back to Elusia to kind of have a rematch, essentially. And at the castle, it's revealed that Marnie and Mauvir are kind of deeper than they seem, and you get some more like backstory on them as characters and like why they chose to do what they do, and why they consider the Four Hounds family, and why they can't anymore, which goes to a really good scene. And it culminates in a discussion that Gris has with Alir, because it's rumored that Sombron had another child, or he had many children, but that another child of his is still living, which turns out to be Alir. And then you find out that the design that everybody's made fun of since this game was revealed, the blue and red hair split, the heterochromia with the red and blue eyes, that was because Alir was born with red hair and red eyes, because he was a fell dragon, similar to how Vale is. And this is very interesting because in concept art, Alir also had black and white hair, similar to how Vale does. But he was born with red hair and red eyes before he went to sleep. And it was only just before he went to sleep, when he took a fatal blow, that the hair turned half blue, and that only turned half blue because he was healed by Lumera. Like, Lumera gave her energy to him, healing him, and that's why he went to sleep instead of dying. So he became half Divine Dragon. So half Divine Dragon, half blue hair, blue eye. It's so cool. I love that they made the character design a thing in the story. And this was a really cool scene. It made me love Alear a whole lot. And one of the cool parts about it is when Gris is questioning and proving to Alear that he is a Fel Dragon is based on how they summon emblems. Fel Dragons summon emblems through invocations. So whenever they're summoning an emblem, Alear will be like, "Wake us, blah 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 blah, Marth," or "Heal us, Emblem of Dawn, Micaiah," kind of thing. Like, it's through the invocation, and Divine Dragons summon emblems through prayer. So that's when Alear's like, "Oh shit, I've been doing invocations this entire time," and that's what kind of registers it, because otherwise he'd have no reason to believe this villain who obviously wants the worst for him, but now he can't deny it. But then it shows that when Fel Dragons summon emblems, they have the red hair and they don't speak because they are forced into their service, like when Sombron summons them when he steals them from you in chapter 11. So you might be wondering, well, how are the characters normal for us? And that is because Alear is half Divine Dragon. So he uses a combination of invocation and prayer, and that's what gives them their normal qualities. And we continue through, and Sombron comes and does something that kind of shocked me. He kills Alear. Oh, he's trying to kill Vale, but Alear jumps in front of the blast. He takes the hit. He dies. 100% dies. And Vale is mind controlled, going back to her other personality. And so Alear meets Vale in this in-between space, separated from your body. And they come up with this really cool plan, which uses something that came up earlier in the story, where Vale can summon Corrupted. Corrupted are essentially this game's version of the Risen. They are bodies that have been reanimated back to life. And you see kind of earlier on that you fight the king of Illusia after he's been killed. You fight his reanimated corpse, Hyacinth. And Vale was able to reanimate him to a point where his personality was back. He was still a husk of what he used to be, but she was able to bring his spirit back from the void. And they use this to literally reanimate Alear back into his dead body, which is metal as fuck. And you go through a chapter where you're reclaiming all of the emblem rings now that Sombron has gained the power from them and then fled, because his plan is to invade other worlds and conquer them as well. He's basically I'm literally done with your world. You can continue to live here and you can live fine lives, because I'm done with here. I'm going everywhere else. Which is kind of cool, because it brings up the moral dilemma of there are probably some people that are probably wishing that, let's get back to life. Is it our responsibility to save the multiverse? But the answer is yes. At this point, after you reclaim the rings in a really cool gameplay element where the rings are actually scattered around and you have to go bring Alear to re-engage them, you learn that engaging the emblems did take energy from Alear's reanimated body, and that's not an infinite resource. So he's dying again after making sure that his friends can like carry his will onto the end. And normally I would say like, oh, this is a cop-out, it's just a fake out death again. But they set these both of these like deaths were set up earlier in advance, so it's perfectly fine for me, because earlier on we saw half of the emblems talking with each other, saying like, we have a power that we can only use once, but we should agree to use it together. And like they allude to the next part I'm going to talk about, but it's something that they always could have done, but they didn't have a worthy candidate for it yet. And that power is they can cause a miracle, and that miracle is when Alir's like reanimated body starts to give way and die, he is brought back to life as an emblem. Alir is the 13th emblem now, the fire emblem, and I have some things to say about that in a second. But this miracle was something that came about in such a perfect way, it threw me for a loop. Like, this is when the story, like before the story was getting really good, this is when I knew this story was way more special than I gave it any credit for at the beginning. Because in the beginning of the story, Lumera gives Alir a ring, and he's like, oh, well, what emblem's in this? And she's like, no, it's empty, there's nothing in it. I made a promise to you that before I died, I would give this to you. And she made the promise to him before he went to sleep. She says, when you wake up, I'm going to give you the best birthday present. So you get this ring. And my theory was that after her very inevitable death, she was going to be the 13th emblem summoned through that ring. And they support that in that conversation between the emblems. They say they think that Lumera might be a good candidate, but they should wait until they're all reunited so they can discuss the possibility. So we have a valid reason why this didn't happen when they were talking about it. We have a play on theory making that happened with the setup of the ring, and then you have the payoff with the twist that it's not Lumera they used the ring or the miracle on, but Alir himself, when they're all in agreement. And they say, we can never do this again. We are risking all of our future ability on saving you right now because we think this is worth it. And when Alir comes back as the emblem, his hair turns fully blue. He becomes a full blue-haired anime swordsman. I screamed. It is such a powerful moment. It's such a good moment. And with this miracle, he is able to also regain his body. So like the weird thing is that is like sort of not explained well is he is able to regain his body fully as half divine dragon, half fell dragon. So normally he has the red hair, blue hair split because that is what his body is. But he also now has his spirit locked in the emblem, which is the blue hair Alir. Because it's very important to note that the emblems are not the characters themselves taken from the world, which is what I thought at the beginning. But it is a capture of their essence, their soul, at that point in time, taken. Because they have the memories of their adventures, but they are not specifically those characters. That's why in the beginning Marth's like, I'm Marth, I'm Emblem Marth, actually. So, Emblem Alir has all of the memories of regular Alir, and after regular Alir passes, Emblem Alir will live on as the other Emblem Lords will have. So that is why Alir goes back to the red and blue hair after this scene, and this also gives you extra gameplay benefits where you can do like a special engage, which is like basically just a super move, which is really good. From this point, you have all your emblem rings back. You can outfit your team however you want. And I thought the game was about to end, but I learned that there are 26 chapters in total, which is a crazy amount for like a single route Fire Emblem game. So I'm glad that it's a hefty amount. You have to travel across this new land which Sombron has raised up called Gradlon, which kind of surrounds Lythos. And you have to pass, like, essentially pass 3 trials, but basically kill or destroy 3 fell fragments, which are keeping a barrier from where Sombron escaped to. And the first fragment is you basically finish off Zephyr and Gris in a final map. And this map, or this story, is where you kind of learn more about them and their backstory. And this chapter and this like aftermath scene after you finish the chapter, humanize them in such a really, really good way. The level of world building and character development that this last arc is doing is insane. These are some of the most like well-developed Fire Emblem characters, and it really makes me miss them and feel for them, especially when throughout the beginning of the game you think they're just the basic, I'm bad because you're good and darkness, I serve the Dark Dragon. Obviously they're that way in the beginning, but learning more about them and humanizing them is really, really well done. And the scene of Gris recognizing that he dies after Zephyr, and that he says nothing else can hurt him anymore, so he dies holding her hand. It's so good. It's so good. And then I should say, before that happens, Zephyr gives us the way to destroy the second stone, and she says, she's a very good reasoning for like why she is helping us now. She says, it's solely because I have no time to do things right that I'm doing this now. And she like said like her ultimate motivation was for Sombron to give her a child so she could have a family. And that's what she tried to build with the 4 hounds, and that was her motivation the entire way through. And so she gives us this way because the second fell crystal is like deep under a lake, because back in the old days before Gradlon sank, it was on like a huge high mountaintop. And so you think that the crystal you got is gonna like raise that part of Gradlon back up. Turns out, I don't know why I thought that would be it, because they just let me assume that. It's another dragon time crystal. So you get sent to 1,000 years in the past for this one chapter, which is a really like cool thing, because time travel in a game like this is usually for like an extended period of time. But you go back, and the boss of this chapter is Alir, as he was in the past, red hair and all. It's Kino. I love it. It's so cool. And from this, you get more backstory of Alir's death and how that happened, and him meeting Lumera and why he became a divine dragon. It's so good. It's so cool seeing these motivations fleshed out. These are things that I implied, of course, but it's always awesome getting to see it fleshed out and see exactly why things are the way they are. I love it. And the map for this chapter has a really cool gimmick where avalanches are pushing your units back. It reminds me a lot of the final battle of Conquest. Anyway, moving forward, Vale is like, I know who the final guardian is, but you have to promise me that I'm gonna take care of it and you guys stay behind. And Alir's like, no, we're a team, we gotta do this together. She goes ahead and she like locks the door behind us, because she knows that the final guardian is a reanimated Lumera. Now this reminded me a lot of Fates when you're going through Vala and you fight like, you know, the false Mikoto or whatever, and it's created by Yoret. All that gave me huge Fates vibes, but it was done so well. Because Lumera has, because we do know it's corrupted. It's like their personality but corrupted, but it's everything she says is everything I believe the real Lumera would say in her like darkest moments, because she had a very tragic past where her family and friends was all decimated, and meeting Alir was the first time that she felt not alone, and becoming his mother was the best thing that ever happened to her, and she would give anything to see him happy. And she has a very convincing argument that Alir, having grown, recognizes it's not what he needs, it's not what she would really want for him. And that's the truth of what I think makes this corrupted Lumera work, because it's not just character but evil. It's Lumera's deepest desires twisted. She would, in any other situation, want this, but at this cost, at this way, is against what she would want for him. And it's super satisfying, because I feel like it's honestly healed a lot of what's frustrated me about Fates for so long. It's recognizing that these things were so close to being good, and this is how they do it right. And when I get to these parts in Fates, I'm gonna talk about this parts and engage the same way reversed. It's so good. And then after we destroy all 3 shards, we go to the final area, you know, like you go beyond the portal to where the start of where other worlds begin. And the music kicks in, and it's very interesting because it at first was not as good in my eyes or in my ears as like Awakening, Fates, 3 Houses, 3 Hopes. Their final boss themes are very iconic for me in a very special way, because they're very over the top, they're very in your face, they're very triumphant, they're very bombastic. And this is not. This is, it incorporates chiptune, which on like reflection, it fits the emotions very well. It fits the history of being a 30th anniversary version of the series, or not version, celebration of the series. It fits in ways that this would only really work as this game's final boss theme, and that makes me like it a whole lot more. Now, like musically, I think it is weaker than a lot of the others, but thematically, it's right up there. I think thematically, it's right up there with Id Purpose. Id Purpose is my favorite Fire Emblem boss theme, thematically. And before we even get to the fight, though, Sombron gets backstory. He gets believable backstory, and he develops into more than just I am Dark Dragon, roar. And he talks about his past, of where his life was very similar to Lumera's, and the fact that like his race was wiped out, decimated completely, and he traveled to the Engaged universe as like a means of escape as a young child. And that's because his world also had emblem rings, and those were used to like decimate everything. And he had one ring that was from that world called the Zero Ring. And the emblem of that ring was known as the Emblem of Foundations. And this was an emblem that had no friends. They were a sole one-man army, and they inspired Sombron from early on to like, strength is within yourself. You need to find that strength for yourself. And he took this lesson, and he kind of like kept it in the back of his head, and he started befriending a nearby village, and he like opened himself up. And it was when that relationship soured and they like turned on him that he foregone the act of needing others in a friendship sense of style. But he kept the acts of that emblem in his mind, and he made it his mission to find his friend again. the old emblem that inspired him to survive. And that is why he wanted to travel to the different universes. And he even says, like, invading the other universes is so below what I'm searching for. I'm searching for my friend. I'm searching for the one, the only one that I cared for. And I don't know what drugs the writers were smoking, but like they got me. They took a very simple Fire Emblem story and they elevated it. They elevated it, and it's so good. And you could hear the heartbreak in Alir and Vale at the end when they said, when he is saying that at the end of the day, he was searching for somebody that saw him, that saw his progress, that saw his efforts to survive, and wanted to be there for him like that emblem was. And Alir says, we could have been that for you. Why wouldn't you have let us be that for you, what you were searching for? And Sombrun says, I couldn't ever seek help from this world. I was too far gone. And Alir says, well, what was the invocation of your old friend? And Sombrun says, I've tried thousands of times. That's not going to work. And Alir is like, try it one more time. And he says, connect us or burn us, emblem of foundations. And Sombrun sees his old friend. They're never given a portrait. He's looking up at Alir and Vale, and some people I've noticed have taken this to mean that Alir and Vale were like his emblem, but that doesn't make any sense whatsoever because they're his children. They didn't exist before. He's looking at them, and they specifically say, like, or Vale is like, who is he looking at? Because Sombrun's like, oh, my friend, finally. Let's one last time engage. And the chapter's name is The Last Engage, and it's for that moment. I love that. I wanted to mention that. But he's seeing his friend finally, and he's reuniting with him, and he goes with him into death. And A, that's beautiful. And B, the emblem of foundations is not someone that we see. It's not Alir, it's not Vale, it's not the both of them combined. It's someone that we do not see, and my theory is it's possible that it might be Kirin from Heroes, like the character that you create, the summoner, because it's possible that as the emblem of foundations, where all the they return to, Fire Emblem Heroes is that like world, and it's very interesting because this game is so inspired by Fire Emblem Heroes, it's nuts. Like the fact that all of the weapon types are color-coded, and knives are given like the colorless code alongside like Tiki being like a Manakete, and how swords are red, blues are lance, greens are axe. Like that's all from Heroes. And they straight up added the Tempest Trials as a side mode from Heroes into this game. So like Heroes, as much as this is an anniversary, like Heroes definitely is like the lifeblood of this game. And obviously that's because like you have the summoning of the main heroes from other worlds, just like Kirin does with Bradleblick. And also the characters shout the game's title name at the title screen, just like Fire Emblem Heroes. So I do think, until we learn more, which is possible we do, it's possible it's just left up to interpretation. But I do believe he was trying to go to the world of Heroes, and Kirin was his friend that he met up with in the end. Now, that is the end of the game, and like the emblems, the end credits happen, and like the final scene happens where the emblems are alive, but they are resting for their 1,000 years again. And you go through all the endings of all the characters, which has paired endings again, which is really great. The one there are a few that I want to make note of because they're very interesting. Alfred dies really early, which took me off guard. I was like thrown for a loop when I saw this paired ending. Well, single ending because only Alir gets paired with somebody. And I chose Chloe. But I didn't know about this because I didn't read any of Alfred's supports because I wanted to save like going through supports for a later time. because I just wanted to beat the game. I read quite a few, but I didn't go through every single one I had available. And it's revealed between him and Celine that Alfred has like a really serious terminal illness, and his like oddities are because he wants to like help fight against it. And like, people say the sports in this game are bad. Like, what? That's crazy. It's so crazy. Really sad for Alfred. Rip. F in chat. But another one that was very interesting was Anna's, where she goes back to Illusia, where she's from, very interestingly. I saw that in the Fire Emblem Wiki when I was reading off the characters earlier. I didn't know she was Illusion. But she goes back to Illusia, to her family, where her family is entirely just of her sisters who have the same name and the same face. It's so funny. I love it because Anna is a constant in the Fire Emblem series, and there's not every, but a lot of Fire Emblem games have a red-haired merchant-like character named Anna. I think New Mystery of the Emblem's the only one where she's not a merchant specifically. And even like other characters that support with Anna are like, you look really familiar to someone I know from my world. Which was fine, because I just kept thinking of like a Nurse Joy, Officer Jenny situation from the Pokemon anime, where it's just millions of Annas. But there are end graphics, and one of them shows Anna meeting up with her sisters, and it's specifically the Annas from Awakening and Fates that are there to greet her. Which I'm not even going to go into the logistics of, because the Annas can just travel through dimensions at their own leisure. It's not even to the point where they're just being assigned to these universes. They can just cross-travel now. Sure, go ahead. Whatever. That's like my last thought on the story. I do have one final thing I want to talk about, and this is the final spoiler warning. It is about the DLC elements that have been data mined in the Wave 1 update. Okay, so we've got data relating to 5 new DLC emblems. And like how we have Tiki and Edelgard, there's data for 5 more emblems. And in no specific order, so this isn't going to say when who's going to come where, but we have Chrom from Fire Emblem Awakening. And it's specifically of note that his animation information in the data imply that Robin, possibly the male Robin, is going to be a part of his emblem. Similar to how Erica and Frame share one emblem, and Edelgard, Dimitri, and Claude share one band, or bracelet. So that's very interesting, because Chrom and Robin are like definitely part of that trifecta of Awakening representation. Next up is Camilla, whom I am not gonna use her. I hate that Camilla's still here. This is the bad place. But yes, Camilla from Fire Emblem Fates, the doting, overly doting is not a good word for it, but older sister from the Norian side. She is a Wyvern rider. Gameplay-wise, I'm sure it's going to be fantastic. I thought we were done. Anyway. Then there's Hector from Fire Emblem 7, who interestingly is like referenced in the game. A lot of the other characters are referenced in the game and supports and whatnot, like both Hector and Eliwood are referenced by Lyn quite a bit. But that's great that Hector is coming through, because he is a very big part of FE7. He has the longest like story of that game, and while I do consider Eliwood to be like the main lord, he is the like least impactful overall in the story. And it is specifically noted that it is just Hector. It's not Hector and Eliwood, as far as we can tell right now. And for the next one is Soren from Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn. I can't believe we're getting Ike X Soren content in 2023, but I'm here for it. Anyway, I'm really glad to see Soren come through. He is a personal favorite of mine. Probably top 5 Fire Emblem characters. And I love his very blunt personality. He's not too, like, caring about emotions of people. so he'll just say the most like blunt thing possible. And then also, Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn spoilers. It's also revealed that he is the true son of Ashnard, when you're led to believe that the entire time it was Kurthnaga, which... no, my bad. You meant to believe it's Peleus, and it turns out to be Soren, because Soren is branded, so he ages a lot slower, similar to Micaiah. Really glad to see him come along. Really, really, really want to see his supports. And then last but not least, and possibly most interesting, because it might lend credence to some of these theories, is Veronica. And you might be thinking, well, I don't know any... Well, I guess there was the Pegasus Knight from Fire Emblem A who was named Veronica, but this is not that Veronica. This Veronica is from Fire Emblem Heroes. This is the Emblem Princess, and Emblem with an N at the end, who was the main antagonist, well, not main, but she was one of the main antagonists of the first book of Fire Emblem Heroes, and who recently got like a redemption story in book 6, and she's like rising in popularity in Fire Emblem Heroes, and is even more credence to the connection to Fire Emblem Heroes that this game is supporting, because she is getting her own emblem ring. She's getting her own unique 3D model for the first time, and it's really cool. And I'm like decently caught up in Fire Emblem Heroes. I'm aware of what happens, but not like the exact specifics. But I think this is deserved, because Veronica has been she's appeared in all of the books in some form or fashion as like a, well, is she gonna really turn to be like a good guy? Is she kind of like an anti-hero? But she's like fully now turned in from anti-hero to full hero. I think this makes sense for a hero's rep, especially since we have Alphonse and Sharina as bond rings with Anna. And there was also some names Datamine for the 4th Wave DLC, which is going to be, like there's going to be a new story, and the character names are, they've been out there. I can't find the Reddit thread off the top of my head, but they're all unique names. And one last thing that was revealed was some support information with Edelgard of all characters. They're like English and Japanese voice lines of their supports, which is very interesting. But yeah, I'm gonna leave that until we like learn more about them, because I can't really speculate off of things that are just new information. But yeah, that is in a nutshell, in an hour-and-a-half long nutshell, my thoughts on Fire Emblem Engage. And I hope you all check this out, even if I've spoiled it all. It's definitely worth your purchase. It definitely is one of my more favorite Fire Emblem games of recent time, and I'm going to be replaying it a lot, and I'm going to be super, super, super stoked for the DLC. Now, if you want some more Fire Emblem content from me, I do have a Fire Emblem Fates retrospective that is beginning on my series. The first video going up to the root split is up, and I will be covering the other parts in it as I get to it. And if you like other kind of review-ish discussion unscripted content from me, I have a Pokemon Scarlet and Violet review in the same stance. And if you want more kind of analytical content, I got a lot of stuff. I got Ben Drowned explained, I got the Somnium Files explained, those two are fully done. I covered my own ARG, 12 Monoliths, and I have plenty that I'm going to get back to eventually, like Xenogears and Nier Reincarnation and Fire Emblem, like I said, and maybe Cause of Death. All that, they can be found down below. You can check me out at my Twitter. You can join my Discord server if you want to talk more in depth about stuff. But with that, have a nice day. I'm done.